Welcome, everybody, to House Education on Tuesday, May 13. We have just two sort of brief things we'll do before more testimony at 2:30 or 2:30. Then thanks, everybody, for being prompt. We're going to start with something that generally takes place at the beginning of the session, which is to sort of get introductions from the various organizations that represent the various sort of educational groups out there. But we ended up diving right into things and had to learn as we went along. Anyway, we have Retta Dunlap from the Vermont Homeschool Alliance. How'd I do there?
Education Network.
Not even close.
That's how you did.
That's okay.
Welcome, and thanks for coming by.
Thank you for accommodating me a little. I started homeschooling 82, 85, depending on, I think, birth works, but and my youngest is going to be 37 in June. So I'm a retired homeschooling mom who stepped into the advocating piece and supporting families for the right to homeschool home educate their own kids. And I have 4 children, all off in life, doing their thing, doing well. And I started Vermont Home Education Network, I would say about 30 years ago, maybe more. I lose track of time these days. And it's primarily been me advocating. But when I send out an email to contact you all, you can get, a few hundred emails in a short period of time. And I try not to do that because over the years, committees have been willing to work with homeschoolers. We don't come in and ask for too much. And in 23, we got what we think is a better law with the hearings after enrollment, which is a mechanism that the state can use to look into a homeschool or home study program that's may not be working. So the word homeschooling is not in the statute. It's called home study. And the definition of a home study program is, I'll just put it how I put it to homeschool, really simple because it's kind of complicated. I can homeschool my kids in home study program. And I can homeschool the children from one other family in my home study program. Or 2 children, one each child from another family. And that's a home study program. That's rarely done, but I have been part of that in that I did daycare one time for a couple of kids in homeschooling, and I was homeschooling them while mom was working. We both had our home study programs and registered with the state. So that's kind of just the basics for homeschooling. There are about, I think, 3,500 kids now enrolled in a home study program here in the state. A lot of people ask, how do you govern that? And it's really kind of hard to herd cats. But families have to sign an affidavit that they will provide 175 days in the minimum course of study, which is found in 906 of the statute, and that they will do an annual assessment and keep it on file at home. And I've told homeschooling families, everybody knows this. So if you end up in a hearing process, you want to defend yourself, you better be able to produce that. Hearings in the past, because the hearings after enrollments has been in the statute since 1985-86 session. So it's been there a long time. They had hearings before enrollments, but now the enrollment is so quick, you really couldn't do those kinds of hearings anymore. So that it is the language is a long-standing piece of statute, a long time. And also a parent, if a child has a diagnosed disability, they also must identify that when they enroll. I think there's no other component to that necessarily. I have to keep some adaptations on file at home. One thing COVID really showed the Agency of Education is that the paperwork load on them was heavy. And they're the ones that actually wrote the bill in 2022 and introduced it, 2023, to reduce that paperwork load. And because they weren't really calling any hearings. And I do know for a fact that DCF also knows of this law change, and they do, it's on their radar to be looking for that whenever they're running into parents. And that other than questions you might have, I just wanted you to know that I'm here. Well, not actually hardly ever here, but upon occasion. We do have 2 bills in, one's in Ways and Means for a tax deduction and another one for parent-taught driver education. And I'm really hoping in January we can move something, at least on the parent driver education one, because it wouldn't cost the state a terrible lot of money to do. Just approve some courses. And there are many states in the union that actually do have parent-taught driver education. So the courses are out there to use, because it's hard for homeschooling families to get driver education. And in that same vein,
It's hard for
It's
all
hard for all.
families.
I was about to say it's hard for the public school families as well. And this is for only home study programs, but, other parents would have to fight for more than that. I can't fight that for them. But I'm hoping we can do something with that, because that's been a huge issue for many years. So.
Thanks. That was a good, accurate description of this bill that I think we ultimately only passed all of it, or maybe we amended it just last year, or was it all in 23? I can't.
I think it was all in the same session.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
passed it in one session. And then
then-
people were concerned about the guardrails. And I said, well, why not put that hearing after enrollment back in? Because it's held in the Department of Education under their auspices, but it does have stiff penalties if that process can unenroll you. And the only recourse after that is to appeal to the Supreme Court.
So for our new members, the bill, which did come from the agency, was really designed, what they were finding is that they just had this paperwork responsibility where they were taking all the lesson plans and not really looking through them because they just had the capacity and putting them in a big file cabinet. And they ultimately decided it would be better to just have the home study families maintain all the records themselves, but they have to be readily available if anybody wants to see them, or if anybody wants to see them. I think that's ultimately where it all landed. I'm assuming since the paperwork that the home study family has to do really hasn't changed.
No, nothing has changed for the homeschooling.
Yeah, it's just a matter of.
That headache of dealing with submission of this. No, they still have to do all this stuff. And
does the number 3,500, which you said, where does that fall if we sort of remove COVID out of the picture?
right, before COVID, it was running around 2,500. It would fluctuate 2,500, 2,700. COVID, it went to 550. Then it's kind of leveled off at about 3,500. So I guess because of COVID, there was 1,000 kid gain. But yeah, and then the reasons parents choose to homeschool are still the same. Special ed, bullying, the kid can't read a clock, things like that is why they might pull them, or the child. A lot of times, some of the kids, they just aren't doing well in an institutional setting. And I see public schools and the independent schools, they're institutional settings, because I'm one of those old time homeschoolers who homeschooled on purpose. My kids were never in an institutional setting until they got to college. And then my girls after college became paraeducators in public school for a short period of time. So it was interesting to watch them experience that. So yeah,
I'd say religion's also a big reason people.
for some, yes. I find in Vermont, it's not the only reason. A lot of people see in the 60s, homeschooling was done by the hippies out in, the Midwest. There was a big Colfax family, and it really started out in that kind of mentality, and then it morphed over into religious. So there is a lot of religious homeschoolers, but they're not the only ones. There's a secular Facebook page. I mean, there even used to be a Wiccan homeschool group in Rutland. So it's Vermont. It is varied. So, no, and I will mention going forward, for the organization of Vermont Home Education Network, we're trying to put a lot more effort into the resource side, because again, during COVID, parents had to homeschool because the public schools were closed, or try to do the online version, which worked or didn't work. We thought maybe, it's good for homeschoolers to have resources, but even parents, in case another pandemic comes down the line, to actually bolster that data so that it's there for families even beyond homeschooling should they need it. But, and, you know, we want to have a statewide conference, which Vermont held one 35, 40 years ago. It just, geography just really isn't there for us. But
Any other questions from community? Yes, go ahead.
We have started looking more closely into the early college program and some data we just got from the Agency of Education. It looks like at least 61 students who are home study students are availing themselves of early college this year. And I'm just wondering how that, if you know, maybe we need to ask the agency, but how that even works. Do they go directly through the agency to enroll? How would that even?
well, as near as I can tell, because I haven't experienced.
Yeah.
So you enroll in home study. And, well, okay, so I'm gonna have to explain this at two different ways because, and I'm not here to complain about this, but the agency doesn't apply the statute as it's written exactly. They fudge in a couple of places and I want to work with them to stop that. Because I was in the committee rooms, the education committee rooms, years ago when they put that early college into the statute and put the PLP, personal learning plans, into the statute. And I was just sitting there listening and the chair said, well, Retta, what do you think? Homeschoolers, you know? So I said, well, if you want to do it so that we're accepting of it and we won't cause any trouble. Here's how I would suggest you do that. They had created personal learning plans, which at the time I believe and still is, that's different from a minimum course of study. That it is a uniquely designed document per each child and what they need. And in that personal learning plan, your college aspirations are to be listed. That's one component of applying for early college and some of the other versions of things that they can get, like they're called. So the homeschooler needs to submit their home study enrollment. Now, we don't submit courses of study anymore. We're to keep them on file at home. So families would have to create a document that satisfied the PLP definition. So they get a login and they can log in and they have to submit this PLP to the early college to get this. I guess it's a voucher of whatever it is. And at the time, I remember telling committees, I said, you know, whenever you hand out money, it comes with strings. It can't fight that. I mean, it comes with strings. And I told homeschoolers, I said, if you want the early college, you're going to have to accept the string, and the string is that PLP. But the agency has kind of morphed it into a minimum course of study, which totally defeats the purpose of what a PLP is. And, you know, I've been trying to work with them. My husband's got cognitive decline, so I have limited time. Work with them to actually, let's look at this as because there's a definition for a PLP and a definition for a course of study. And so that's how the process works. You get an online, you submit your paperwork and I don't know how timely it is because the colleges want it in spring and things happen not in that order. And so, but families are availing themselves of it, so they're figuring it out. Kind of one last thing. I need a legislative sponsor to use the State House on June 16th. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer? Because it's I want homeschoolers to come here and spend a couple of hours. We're going to do the tour guides. They're going to come in and do the big idea tours, and then have like a mock session for homeschoolers. I already have 300 enrolled to come. So I'm looking to use the House chambers as a place for them to sit for a bit.
In those dates for the veto session.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, do I need to move the date?
16th and the 17th, I think, are veto days.
Okay, let me check.
I think
That's
you're
not-
right.
it is.
Well, I haven't filed it yet, and I haven't told homeschoolers that date yet, so I can move. I'm trying to move out past you all.
Yeah, we're gonna be here forever. We're never moving home.
Well, then I might push it to the 23rd.
We better not.
But
Thank you very much for your time and for